In this video, I will cover 7 different categories or areas that discuss how certain qualities about people or the way in which they operate can have a different value in another country and how that can make you question your worth. With each point, I will start off with describing the category I'm speaking about. Then, I will share my personal experience of specific situations, after which I will cover a third person's perspective. I will finish off each pointer by speaking about the relative truth of that area as I see it, and finally, I will give you my 2 cents on it. The first category I will talk about is how you spend social time. The pace of the city I came from was much slower, so the social interactions are more about family time, where the focus is on togetherness, relationships, and conversation. There was infrequent interaction with friends and a lot of lazy days of doing nothing. So it's more about being rather than doing. Living abroad in a city with a pace dissimilar to where I came from, I experienced that there was more focus on doing activities, meeting people in various types of social settings, and fewer spans of not doing anything. My experience of what I found joy in terms of spending my social time, as opposed to what I was observing in my environment, was like the difference between potential and kinetic energy. I was used to a more passive way of life. So what turned out to be more comforting for me was conversations with friends. Even the things I would prefer to spend money on would comprise meals in a restaurant with a smaller group versus buying tickets to a concert. If there was time between lectures, I would tend to walk around on campus with classmates or sit by myself in the cafeteria and wouldn't be inclined to squeeze in an activity at the student union. That was my way of relaxation. However, on the outside, I saw that people were bonding over activities, experiences, and in fact, many of them were of the view that their weekend or evening was wasted if they didn't do anything. It was even part of their regular conversations. What did you do last evening? Or what did you do in the weekend? I feel that how people behave socially is linked to the time in their lives when they chose to be in another place, the requirements of that environment, and the city they came from, which means that they have an inherent pace too. How drastically different it was compared to where they came from, and people's preferences related to what they have grown up doing. They may feel a pressure to fit in and not come across as being boring and uptight. Try a new way of life without the pressure of having to make it your own. Adopt what works for you. What works for you will bring you joy. The second category I will talk about is how you approach relationships. The nature of relationships at home is different. People know you well. You have a different set of expectations which have been satisfied, and you're confident about how the setup operates. Your existing qualities are understood, and you can be that person comfortably. In the newer setup, you meet people at uni or at work, but those relationships are new, so they don't know you and they have a different set of expectations attached to it. So they don't know about your qualities or how amazing you are. That will now need to be re-established. And it cannot happen with everyone because everyone is not your audience. You are not the center of everyone's universe, but initially you can take it all personally. I was expecting the other person to understand me as I was too identified with myself, and I used to get offended pretty easily. My expectations were misaligned as I was used to a different kind of behavior. So my experience of similar situations was different as I didn't get the old feeling I did at home. For example, back at home, I was looked after well, so I assumed that I wouldn't need to ask for help when I was in a crisis, like when I was moving houses some 15 odd times over the years. Other people I encountered also valued the same qualities intrinsically, but they expressed it differently. They were after the same emotions, but their interactions happened in different ways. I experienced that we don't differ that much emotionally, but in terms of the compatibility of what makes us feel those emotions. I realized that no one is consciously trying to upset you. People are not even thinking about you. You tend to have these dissatisfied feelings when either the purpose of the relationship is different, and your emotions are misplaced. Or they are not your audience, or you just have an unfair expectation. There is also the trauma of this sudden change where your body craves the emotional satisfaction it got from the relationships it experienced back home. How people make you feel is not necessarily who they are. Identify other ways to meet the emotional need that you have. And that can only happen if you're aware of what you need. You don't want to impose yourself on someone. It's unfair on them too. The third category I will talk about is how you are culturally. What is valued culturally in one place is not true for another. You have lived a life being used to certain behaviors, habits, and doing things which may seem commonplace, but they become conspicuous by their absence. I obviously look different, but early on I noticed cultural differences in how people order food and split bills, how they independently manage hospital visits, and don't expect to get help with luggage. I remember feeling confused in situations when I had to travel back late at night, when I wasn't used to it. The experience of being alone in that situation is unnerving and can cause a sinking feeling until you go to the other extreme of not needing anyone. The reason for these strong feelings was that I was used to being escorted and family and friends checking on me. Now, this is a different geography where the commute is connected and people are used to traveling independently since a very young age. So there is an assumption that it's okay to travel by yourself and it's normal. It's not a lack of concern by any means. Understanding someone and their culture, the nuances, the intent, how there are different ways in which we do the same thing, requires you to spend time with people and yourself. I learned to empathize with so many cultural shifts I faced in England because I spent so much time there that I imbibed those myself. And when I used to travel back to India, I almost judged people for doing the same things that I used to do. Eventually, it is about what works easily for you and around you so that you can safely be part of a tribe. If you feel certain emotional gaps by missing out on certain cultural norms, don't suppress that part of you. Many people feel ashamed of following their culture and traditions, and I've seen that in some cases they end up making it their identity later in life because that repressed part exhibits itself more forcefully. The fourth category I will talk about is how you showcase confidence. Confidence is demonstrated in different ways in different places. It's not always explicit. You can have innate confidence and not necessarily express it in your manner of speaking or in your body language. The milder examples could be that people coming from cultures where there are multiple layers of easily accessible support structures are initially not as confident in maneuvering the commute system in another country. I also felt underconfident in vocalizing myself in work situations because of the language difference. I will tell you about a strange language barrier or situation that I experienced that diluted my confidence in many situations. Now, I speak in English and we've been taught well in India, but in a country where English is the first language, you can fumble for words. Let me paint a picture for you. When you speak with a British person or a native English speaking person, unconsciously your speech will mirror their accent and you will borrow their vocabulary. And that can work well in most situations, but in a high pressure situation, your real accent and the way you're used to framing sentences in the past will dominate the newly learnt diction and order of words. Effectively, what will come out of your mouth is a compromise between your accent, their accent, your original way of speaking, and the newly learned speech. And that will feel embarrassing and may make you feel inarticulate. People have an acceptance of the fact that it's not your first language, and they're not judging you that much. In fact, you can speak more than one language, and many people can't. So that's got something to say for you. Confidence is an innate quality, and people will recognize it if you have it. What many people do is that they fake it. But even if it does work, you're not embodying the right quality and values. So you will almost be living in fear of being exposed. Being in the habit of speaking authentically, demonstrating vulnerability, and accepting your flaws more regularly makes you inherently more confident in the long term. The fifth category I will talk about is how you balance individual living versus community living. Coming from a place where people live together also means that different people meet different needs for an individual. So the way the support system works, the way the dynamics work, tend to support you in various ways. Essentially, there is more focus on sharing spaces, things, experiences. Then you transition to a place where people are more self-sufficient, and that has been their way of life. They are more equipped to manage the various practical aspects of living because they have been more independent since childhood. I am speaking generally here, it's not true for everyone. I found that once I started to do most things myself, it gave me confidence, but that attitude percolated into most other things, like independently trying to manage a flooding disaster or not asking for financial help when I was in between n number of flat moves. And that makes you lose the plot and not know when to not be such an individual. People who are used to an individual way of life don't experience this drastic cultural shock, so their responses are more tempered when they're approached with situations that requires them to lean on someone outside the experience. Of course, I've seen that they have more ease about that way of life because that's their main option and they are seasoned in it. Family and society structure plays a key role in the way of life you choose. People of different temperaments prefer different types of lifestyles. Although with the movement of people across borders, I see a preference for a blend of both to arrive at a happy interplay between togetherness and autonomy. Internalizing experiences will help you discern when it's more prudent to embrace your individuality and when we need to seek support. Overtly relying on either creates imbalance. The sixth category I will talk about is how aware are you of your sensibilities? You have an existing preference for the joys of life, like music, type of holiday, cuisine. What do you do for pleasure? What do you find humorous? And then you're planted in a different setup, which has all these delicious elements, but they taste different. The British banter, which is my favorite thing now, is not something I attune to automatically. Now, just because I've fallen for that doesn't mean I happen to appreciate their food. Also, even though I enjoy various genres of music, at least I know I'm a Bollywood nut. But unfortunately, I was no good at karaoke nights. People who are residents of a country and have grown up on that food, music, arts, derive the same satisfaction and joy as one would from the things that indulge their palate. This is one of those things which is so personal because it's about what truly satiates us. And that may not be location dependent. I've seen so many people who take to a new culture, the food, their arts, and they say that it's almost like they were meant to travel there to experience what they really needed to. You don't want to pretend to enjoy anything in a foreign land if you don't repeatedly enjoy it. You may be able to happily adjust your food preferences, but not how you like to spend your time on vacation. The seventh category I will talk about is how clear are you of your value system? You will be exposed to cultures, conservative and liberal ways of living. And then somewhere in between that is where you come from, what you have seen. Depending on the age when you go through this experience, if you act in a way that is incongruent with your core values, it will adversely impact you. At an impressionable age, your self-concept is shaky and your awareness of your own value as a person is not clearly established. I found that I acted in ways in relationships or made decisions which are not about being open and experimental, but those that bothered me from the get-go, and I went ahead with it anyway. That certainly created a discord within me. And if you are a very sensitive person, then this is internalized profoundly within you. And it will take over you and put you in deep guilt. Not calling out unacceptable behaviors or mistreatment from people, and even lower intensity things like agreeing to house rental situations with delayed contracts, which doesn't align with your values, or eating dim sum when you don't want to eat animals, were all creating an unrest within me. They are going through the same conflicts, but they act it out in different ways. So it's not the act, but the emotion that threatens your moral compass. Going back to the house rental situation, if someone is okay delaying the contracts, it's possibly because they have more experience with agents or are shrewder in dealing with people of different temperaments. But the same person, if they speak with somebody in a manner which is misaligned with their culture or their core, may feel a greater turmoil within them. It's not the act in itself, but by how many degrees it moves you away from your moral compass. So there really isn't a right what to do in a given situation. Try not to act in the moment due to pressure of social acceptance, especially if it impacts your core values. That's all I have to share in this video. Please do comment if you have a different perspective on any or even all the 7 areas that I spoke about. Creating these videos help me with inner reflection. I hope that the content on my channel can help you to reflect on your emotions. Thank you for watching till the end. I'll see you in the next video.